Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. We're holding by chapter 34. And what's interesting about chapter 34 is we're going to learn all about chinuch. Now, chinuch is, as Rabbi Smith pointed out, chinuch is not education. It goes far deeper than education. Chinuch is the dedication to the service of God Almighty. Bringing up a child or bringing a child to be dedicated to the service of God Almighty. Now, we're all servants. As a human, we are servants. We're always serving something. That's a part of our nature which we can't escape. We better just embrace it. If we're not going to be serving the original source of everything, God Almighty, which are we're inside God, like an idea inside a brain, like the metaphor of an idea inside a brain. If we're not going to serve the original source of everything, we end up serving other things. We end up serving our health. We end up serving our job. We end up serving this and that. So we might as well do all these experiences of life while serving the original source of everything, and recognizing how every experience in life is an experience teaches us something about God Almighty, because it's all inside him. It teaches us a certain aspect about him. So everything is an experience of God. So there is a order to service. There is a specific order, and let's start reading inside. We're going to see that. Thank you for the big words, the big size. Okay, v'hine, behold, bechina zoda atzilus. Now we're learning the interface between the emotions of the divine personality, how they interface with divine thought, speech, and action, which that's what creates our world, where we are God's thought, speech, and action. So Bechina Zada Atzilus is the small faces of Atzilus. In other words, this is the focused emotions, the focused personality of Atzilus. The world of Atzilus is basically God's personality, the way he set it up so he could be able to, we would be able to relate to him. Yesh Beis Bechinas Hanikra Yisrael Yaakov. There's two modes, Yisrael mode and Yaakov mode, Kiyadua, like it's known. Yisrael mode is when the subconscious mind is aligned even with the brains, and Yaakov is when the subconscious, the conscious is aligned with the brains, but the subconscious is not necessarily aligned with the brains. If a person goes into a situation of a sudden shock, then they may behave in a misaligned, the gut reaction may be misaligned to their thinking. So basically, a person starts off as Yaakov and they train themselves to be Yisrael. It's okay. Let's explain the parts of the levels in this, parts of the steps. First, we need to understand the reason why Jacob, our forefather, was renamed Israel. Because Israel is made out, is actually Sar from the Israel. Sar is like the English word sir, which means a knight, right? Kisarisam Elokim. He had a bout. Him with Elokim refers to angels. Basically, he had a wrestling match with angels. Basically, that's what it means. He served. He means was an activated knight, right? Um, and he was successful. Vushema, and the power inside him that allowed him to do that is the name of God, which, when spelled out, it numerically ends up being Ma, which is 45. And when Ma is activated, it 1 second, somebody. It clarifies and rules over Shemban. Shemban is the name of God which really is more like the animal soul. Ki b'chachma is beriru, because with insight we can bring clarification. And the power of a masculine is to clarify things. So Shemban can also refer to the feminine. And a man, a strong man, is a guide for his wife. Because a man's way is to conquer. And it's interesting, it's written that what gives man the power to be a guide for his wife, that is the repetition of Mishnayos. So by repeating Mishnayos, that gives the person, that reveals the Shema inside him, so he could refine his wife. That's on a practical term. It's very important to read Mishnayos in the street. It purifies the air. So uvira advarim. Let's explain these words. First, we need to understand Hafresh ben Yisrael Saba Yisrael Zuta. We need to understand the difference between Israel, the grandfather, and the small Israel. We spoke about this before. The emotions inside, because inside Chachma has its 10 facets, and the 7 lower facets are the emotions, and they are called Israel, the grandfather. And there are in these 2 levels, Ha'alef Midesh Sheba'er Abba. There's the emotions in the light of the insight. Va'beis, and the second one is Midesh Sheba'chachmastima. There are emotions in the hidden wisdom. Now, the hidden wisdom is really the liquid around the brain, is the potential for, it's like the pleasure which allows a person to think. So there's also emotions inside this hidden insight. Nikra Adam Kadma, and the Zohar calls it the original man. And now we can understand the meaning of the verse. What is his name, and what is his son's name? So, but it also means Ma, that name of God is his name, and that name of God is his son's name. In other words, the same idea of Israel, the emotions inside wisdom repeat themselves, just on a higher level and on a lower level. The way the emotions are lower than insight, that's called the small Israel. That's the regular Israel that we're referring to. Because you know why he's called? Because these are the emotions which are basically small emotions, each one configured into its place. For the reason that they become in their really focused and hidden, it's ikar etzem, because the reasoning behind them is hidden. Basically, the only intellect in it, the only reasoning is what the lowest facet of the insight, which is netzach v'haid, which is basically, do we go for it, or do we hold back? Is it a yes or a no? That's basically the movement aspect of insight, mamshech lahalid, which it basically moves in order to give birth to an intellect, and to come up with an idea, in order to perform a kindness, or a love, which is called a small love. Why small love? because it's very focused. It's not overwhelming. It's something that can be accomplished, and something can be done. And what we're explaining over here, it repeats itself in many aspects of life. And he's going to give one metaphor with commercial, like the metaphor tipasha b'me'achav. There's a drop in the brain of the father, and this drop is around. This is a subdural fluid around. It's a liquid around the brain, and it actually can power the brain to be able to come up with new ideas. And the chokhmah stima, the hidden insight, is inside this liquid. Um, Kach nemar, in other words, it's basically a vessel for the hidden insight. Kach nemar ma shem benoi, and therefore it's written, what is the name of his son? Shehu Yisrael Zuta, which is the small Israel. Shrim Shachlei Mitipas Abba. It actually comes from the drop of the father. So it's an interesting thing that this liquid can go down the path of the spinal cord and end up becoming this liquid ends up becoming the semen. And so you see from this metaphor that that you have in actuality, this higher insight actually does become an actual physical son of a father. So that's why when we say Ma is the father and Ma is what's the name of the father, what is the name of the son, they do have very much, they have similarities. And what happens in the physical is, okay, the Netzach and Hoid, you say the Abba of the father. Now it happens on a spiritual level and a physical level. So there's the inner Netzach Hoid Yisod and the external Netzach Hoid Yisod. For example, the right thigh and the left thigh. Right thigh is Netzach, the left thigh is Hoid. Then in more of an inner one is the kidneys, the right kidney and the left kidney. So also the testicle, the right testicle and the left testicle is also Netzach and Hoid. And Yesod is the apparatus of connection above that. So that physically is Nimshach, is drawn into the same apparatus of the Ema of the mother. Shehu bechinas hashpas, and this happens on a spiritual sense as well. So hu bechinas hashpas v'hashpalas asaga, and it also happens in the brain itself. That I don't know if there's the same apparatus, but that there's some sort of connection from the Netzach Yisod of the right brain goes into the left brain, which basically then gives birth. The left brain gives birth to an understanding, the tam and reasoning, lemidas chesed, why a certain emotion should be done. Something very interesting happens in the physical world, and that also explains to us what happens spiritually, that when the mother is giving birth, the Netzach Yesod of the mother sort of become not functional. B'shas tolda, in the time of birth. Gile hispilus midasava. So that also happens in when the brain is creating an emotion. You can't really ask a person why they feel what they feel. In other words, the reasoning has to sort of disappear, and there's a jump that happens when the left brain gives birth. Like you'll ask people, why are they doing this? Well, they don't know why they're doing this because their reasoning sort of had to skip a beat in order for it to convert, to reconfigure itself as an emotion. V'kenira b'chush, and we see very clearly, b'chush is it's experiential. Shemiskatzer mistalek atam, that the reasoning becomes short, becomes concise. That's mitzkatzer. Mistalek, it gets forgotten. Hatam, the reason about seichel and the logic. V'shas is palos hamidus, when a person is experiencing the emotion. And this we see in Chumash, in the Bible. It says that the story of Moses' sister and mother, they used to be they used to help women give birth, and Paro knew the physicality. He was having a conversation with them, and the words that he used, very isam alavnaim, you'll see them on the stones. What does that mean? That the woman's thighs become cold like stones at the time of birth. And the reason why this happens by the occurrence of actual birth is because spiritually, because the the reasoning, the intellectual reasoning sort of disappears when they give birth, and a whole new connective response mechanism is born, which is similar to the idea of a child with its own feet is born. The mother's feet become like stones when the child creates his own feet. This is explained in another place. And this whole occurrence and phenomenon is called Bikias Yisod Daima. When Bikia is basically spears through. Yisod is the connective device, the connective organ of a woman spears through Lahaila Damida to give birth to an emotion. So the brain does it as well. Beginning, the emotion is hidden inside the brains, similar to like a baby inside a mother's stomach. That's how emotion is born from intellect. It's like a baby in the mother's stomach, and it breaks through, and then it's like a whole new, it's like a thing on its own. And if you learn about triggering emotions, you'll notice sometimes is that the reason why a certain emotion was triggered, once an emotion is triggered, it can become counterproductive. It has a life on its own. It doesn't follow the original reasoning, right? But however, after the emotions are born, they do have the kindness of the inside of the father, but and the focus of the mother. But close in general, holistically, the kid is something has a similar setup. But in general and in the parts. Hariyesh bezeh gimel madrigas. There are actually 3 levels, 3 steps in this process. Bechinas meichin diyanika. And now we're speaking about the nurturing process. The child is born, and there's meichin diyanika, which means that the brain are nurtured. And that means that the child is borrowing the brains of the mother, and that's why they need to stick around the mother all the time. They can't be left alone because they have no brains without the guidance of the mother or parent. So that's called Meichin Diyanika. The brain is nurturing of somebody else's external brain. Bechinas Meichin de Gadlus Arishin. Then there is Meichin de Gadlus big brains, the first level of independent brain that happens from 6 years old till 9 years old. Deima, it's building detailed thinking. V'gadlus hasheni, the Abba, and then there's the second growth of the Abba, of the building insight, is from 9 to 12, or for a girl, and a boy needs a little more, 9 to 13. A child can't understand a idea that they can't see before 9 years old, because they don't have that growth of the insight. They're only growing their left brain. The left brain means detailed thinking. They can serve themselves like an animal. I know how to get this independently myself, but they can't understand abstract concepts that can't be seen till after 9 years old. Because at 9 years old they start developing their insight. That's why the flash of a new idea, that's an experience which doesn't happen before 9-year-olds. You know how you focus on something and suddenly you have a new idea? That only happens after 9 years old. That's the flash of insight. So what we have is the first 3 years is the child is developing the Netzach Yesod, which is basically the locomotive movements, coordination. That's really the focus. And the next 3 years, they've mastered the basic locomotive movements. But from 3 to 9 years old, they're developing emotions. Hey, sharing and waiting your turn and waiting in line. And oh, you hurt the other person, and they can't continue to play anymore because they got hurt. And we can't do that. You have to make sure not to hurt anybody. So these feelings glad, sad, mad, all these feelings are developed from 3 to 6 years old. 6 years old, they don't need to borrow the mind of the mother, and they could actually be by themselves, and that's why um, um, that's the traditional time where people would go to school, right? Preschool is only an invention when people go to work. So that's at 6 years old. And then from 6 to 9, they're developing the left brain, but it's still just serving their own purposes, like an educated animal. They're serving instincts that's just a little more sophisticated. At 9 years old, they can start um, understanding abstract concepts they can't see, because they're developing their right brain, and that continues till 12 years old for a girl and 13 years old for a boy. And then from 13 to 20, the goal is to enjoy what they're doing. Obira Dvaram B'Yis Yedua, and the explanation of the matter is it's known. Shamidas Heim B'Chinas Ibur Tlas Gav Tlas. Emotions are like a pregnancy, 3 inside 3. In other words, the Tlas Gav Tlas is 3 inside 3, is the fetal position. The Netzach, which is the thighs, and the head is wrapped into the thighs. It's like a person's folded up. The Hainu Rachitzenis Netzach Yesod. So the only thing that's active is the external aspects of Netzach Yesod, which is the 2 thighs. Uvehem kolu behelam chabad v'chagas, and hidden inside them is the emotions, the respiratory that are connected with the respiratory system, more advanced emotions, and Chabad is the inside cognitive comprehension, and Das, the ability to focus. Furak b'chinas fias hamidis, but the external midis Netzach Yesod is only just the gut reactions, flight or fight, like they say, but that's negative emotions. There's also the go towards what's good, go away from what's bad and go towards good. That's the yes and no. That's what Netzach Yesod is. Uvekias uveyanika. And what happens is, when the child is at the nurturing stage, when they're nurturing their brains, misgadlim liyes ba'achan lekabel meichin, Basically, the emotions grow the emotions grow in order to be able to receive their own independent thinking. Independent thinking is supposed to start at 6 years old. Say that again. Independent thinking is supposed to start at 6 years old. V'hu k'mei tinuk shemizgadol evarav mi'nikas chalav imei. A child that his limbs grow from taking his mother's milk, kedua like it's known, ad should be Yosef ben Vav Shana, and then he's basically taking his mother's brains like milk for constant advice. So yesh b'videsav mechim b'tzumtzum, and in his emotions there are like limited. There's a limited intelligence. Basically, it's the intelligence in order to be able to drive himself in all his ways, not just like um, reactive emotions like an animal. That's till 6. So basically, what the child has till 6 is basically reactive emotions like an animal. Let's go on. Just see further down the page. So he's not like an animal anymore at 6, but at 9 years old, theoretically, he's able to have his own children. If he's a why? Because it depends on the brain. We say that the semen comes from the brain, from the liquid around the brain. So when the brain is developed, it actually can create semen that's viable. So it's possible for it to be viable from 9 years old, because the brains are bigger, because the insight is starting to be developed. More intellect than is required to run the emotional system levad alone. So basically, we have a surplus of intellect at 9 years old. And this is really part of what being human is about, having a surplus of intellect, more than just getting your basic needs. And also what he's able to do, which wasn't possible before 9 years old, is to create an emotion only because of reasoning. Actually, so what a person can do from 9 years old, they can give birth to an emotion which they didn't have before, which only was created through their reflection and for their reasoning. He basically, when the intellect guides a person differently than what their gut reaction would be, it's possible that a human will give birth to another emotion, and that also, it's not such a thing that we've heard of in the animal kingdom. Why do we say kingdom, by the way, in English? Because it all comes from Malchus, which is an aspect of kingship, God kingship, but that's a side point. And it's possible that a person will come to the level that realize, hey, I'm going to run all my emotions according to what makes sense, according to my intellect. If it's the right thing to do, that's what I'm going to feel and enjoy. If it's the wrong thing to do, I'm not going to enjoy it. And that's possible to develop from 9 years old. Before 9, before 9, there's only enough to supply, there's no surplus intellect, only according to the emotion. Which he already has coined into him. Before 9, he's able to be intelligent in serving the emotion which is already coined inside him. And that's what animals also are able to do. They're able to create, they're able to make combinations and intellect according serving the emotion which is already coined into them. They can be clever in their emotions, how to find food. Basically, at that age, a person is called an animal in the speakers. Chai, a living animal, sheba medaber, amongst the speakers that communicate verbally. That's till 9 years old. Till 9 years old. Omi ben tes ve'elach. Now we're really speaking about things that make us human, and when we differentiate from the animals, at what point in time, and why computers cannot be human, and why getting more megabytes of processing data will not make a person more human or a better human at all. Because what makes a person human that from 9 years old and onwards, muchan legadles sheni de abba, then a person is ready to get the second greatness of the insight, of the father from the insight, dahainu sheyeh gabrus hasechol alamides, that a person will be able to make their intellect overcome their emotions. It's not that their emotions serve their intellect serves their emotions. In other words, they have very big desires, and they find more clever ways to fill those desires. No, that would be under 9 years old. A real human, which is over 9 years old, and by the way, the age of a person is not on the passport. This is a normal human development. Some people didn't develop, and they may be still holding by 6 years old, and they're really, in the 40s. So if a person develops normally, that from 9 years old, they will be able to make their intellect drive their emotions only according to reasoning, according to what's right. Like it's written in another place, Binyan ki resh miresh turim bariches. Meshturim is a quote saying that from Bilam, from the top of the mountains. Anyway, I don't know how that's connected over here. Well, Roy, 1 second. Oh, yeah, I don't. Biure Hazayer on Balak. Okay, so we need to look up on the explanations of the Zayer and Balak to understand the connection over here. But that's a brackets anyway, so we'll continue. And that's why a human gets the ability to give birth at that time. Because then every emotion has every other emotion. It has a full 9 spheres. Every emotion has chabad and intellect. Chagas, it has an experience of feelings. Benehi, and also has the practical the motions of movement. Chekashe nigdalu hameichin lokol mida bechinas chabad, when every emotion also has reasoning attached to it, as mimela yeshkach bechinas nehi laholit blood. Then the lower emotions are capable to give birth to a child. He habahatalia, because basically what's higher goes lower. That's Habahatalia. When you throw a rock from a taller place on the hill, it rolls further down. So the higher things are expressed in the lower capabilities of man. So the reproductive is physically on the body, it's a lower capability, yet the higher abilities of the intellect, not only to create intellect, but to actually be able to give birth to another human being, which has an intellect on their own, which is an even greater achievement than achieving personal intellect, right? That happens when a person's reached a certain level of emotional maturity that their intellect could actually give birth to emotions, and that's what makes a person uniquely human, that their intellect could create emotion. Let's go further. Like we already said in chapter 36. V'yeseh ben Vav, V'yeseh ben Vav, hayakol mina kolul mechagas. Nihibelvad, when he was only 6, every single emotion didn't didn't really have reasoning. It only had love. I love this. Or I hate this. Chagas, kindness, strictness. I had a balance emotion. Yeah, that he had, and that then drove the movement emotion. The brains are very, very small at that point in time. Raklafit symptom ativius shalamida, only according to the gut reaction, the natural reaction of each emotion. Regardless sheni, however, the second growth, in other words, once they've gotten those, they grew the one intellectual growth and then the second intellectual growth of insight, then from a boy from 13 years old ad chav until 20, which is 7 years, then he has the maturity in halacha, in Jewish law. We consider him to have the maturity to be able to sell property, real estate of his father, because he has the maturity to understand what is money. In other words, before 20, we say that a person doesn't understand the value of money. What is money? It's something that we agreed, a number that we agreed to measure energy with, human energy. And when you buy an object, well, there's a certain amount of energy which took to be able to get that object, create that object and get it to here and invent that object. So we're basically giving a number to human energy. And a person can think that, wow, these numbers, these tickets that we're getting, that they're really of value. And what ends up happening, no, the only thing of real value is something that can create food, which is the ground. So why would you swap ground for certificates, money? Because certificates you can't eat. He doesn't have the maturity to understand that a ground creates cash flow. So I might have much more money if I sell the field, but that's not as valuable as a yearly cash flow from the crop. Nowadays, more it's like the renters, but really the true wealth value of something is the crop, the yearly crop. So I'm getting less money from the yearly crop, but that's a far more stable situation. It's a stable situation for generations than a lot of shiny gold, which I can't eat. So somebody under 20 years old doesn't understand. They think more money means more value. And over 20-year-old, they'll say, no, less money, but the piece of real estate which grows grows crop or brings in a cash flow year to year, even though that is less, but since it's something that's real and it could give us what we eat, right? That is more valuable. So we're not going to sell the real estate. So who can sell real estate? Only a person who has that maturity, and that's at 20 years old. Basically each year the crown, he's developing the crown, the enjoyment. In other words, a person before 13 years old is not able to be a Bainani to have perfect behavior, but he's able to do it after 13 years old. After 13 years old, the person could have perfect behavior and perfect self-control. After 13 years old, every human being could have perfect self-control. But however, that is not an enduring state. You really need to enjoy some of the things, a lot of the things that you do. You don't have to enjoy everything, but some of the things you need to be able to enjoy. So that what a keser is. The keser is like the pleasure and everything. And the emotions in the spheres is 7, so it's 7 years. Each year from 13 years old till 20, a person develops a new stage of enjoyment in the things that they do, that they should want to do the right thing. They should want to do the mitzvahs and enjoy doing the mitzvahs. And that is the focus from 13 years old to 20. Let's see it inside. Basically, moving the want moves every emotion, even higher than intellect, shel hamida, than of the actual emotion. Ad ben chaf shehu gadol samechin the midas b'shlemus. Until 20 years old, a person could become a tzaddik. They could have the emotions wanting the right thing, and the emotions grow big, and because there's a mature mind. The mature mind is not only reasoning, but it also the pleasure and the want, the proper want and the proper direction that is behind the reasoning. Because you could have an intellectual person, but they're a bad person. Well, no, we're speaking about an intellectual person that's a good person at heart, because they develop that from 13 to 20. And by the way, knowing he knows how to sell his father's property, right? One of the rule of property is never sell property. But if you're going to sell, at least it's only to buy more. Yeah, but Meichin Abba basically means this is also a hint to the fact that he's reached his father's thinking. So he reached the next level of insight. And on a physical level in the Jewish law, he's now able to transfer domain, sell real estate, to move from one domain to another. Well, on the emotional state, what do they call it? Meta, I don't know what it's on a spiritual level. That's because on a spiritual level, he's able to move emotions into different domains just because he wants to. Let's give you another a metaphor. He's able to find different words and different wordsmithing, different word combinations, because he understands the depth of the intellect. In the essence, if in its source. So he's not just parroting, but because he deeply understands an idea, he's able to say things in totally different ways, because he came to the source of the intellect, and that's a deep emotional level. It's a very stable, also very stable thinking. We spoke about a wondrous wise man. I think he said it's a novid. that he got to the source of things. If a person gets to the source of their domain, they can really understand other domains because they all related. And now we understand a little bit what is Israel, because Yaakov is at 13 years old, but Israel is at 20 years old. Now we understand what a proper level of Israel is. Israel is a tzaddik where his gut reactions are totally in line with his intellect. Li Rosh. So Israel is also the words Li Rosh. To me is a head. He has brains. Or moichin brains. I have a head and I have brains. A head is like the want, which is directs the brains. Which this is having the crown and the intellect. In other words, he knows where to put the intellect into the right place. This is a really big, great mindedness. He's able to guide ban, which is the feminine energy. Elokim, and in the spiritual worlds, the feminine energy is Elokim, the Almighty. He's able to inspire the energies which are enclosed in nature. Kiyodua, Mishum the B'chachma Pnimis Kayachma Davka, because only a deep insight, the power of what specifically Shmechinas HaKesed, that comes from the crown, the Chachma Shebemidis of the crown of the insight and emotions, is Bariru. You can actually refine untamed or undirected emotion. A great wise man that knows the depth of the intellect, from its original source, he knows much more how to clarify and to whiten and to remove impurities and cognitive distortions and mistakes. A person sees where their mistakes are if they are connected to the source. And also, if a person has a deep intellect, he's able to use it to be able to bring income, in a profession, or profits from his work, or also from his Torah is his profession, so he's able to bring great value, not a financial value, but a great value from his Torah. And he can guide people. It's like the idea that a man's way is to conquer, but the way he's conquering is through insight, not through brute strength. Is through insight that the people accept the guidance because it's wise. Shu b'chinas shema, and this is the name. This is powered by the name of God, which is called 45. Ma, the chachma of insight, shemavar laban, which refines ban, which is the feminine energy, which actually we're going to learn is the actual thought, speech, and action of the world, the actual nature of the world. So ban can be, but also man ban is the relationship between a man and a woman. So if a man goes deep into himself, he's able to refine that relationship and guide that relationship, not because of brute strength, but because of superior insight. And the similar, Yaakov was able to win with the angel because the outside world aligns itself to the wise man. Yaakov's name, your name is changed to Israel because you wrestled with the angel Elohim, which represents the Almighty, the angel, which basically an angel is one Almighty, right? So the different powers in the world, and the God is behind all of these powers, and an angel is like a specific power. In this case, it was the power of behind his brother Esav, and he was able to be victorious because of his superior, ultimately because of his superior level in self control, insight. And that is the end of this week's chapter. I hope that was interesting and even fascinating. Back to you, Rabbi Smith.
Yes, very much so. Thank you. And also, it's interesting. I just looked up the word knight because you were tying this in with a knight, sire, sir. So one of the definitions is a medieval gentleman soldier, usually highborn, raised by a sovereign to a privileged military status after training as a page and a squire. It's like it requires training.
Right.
Requires it's attitude training. It's a whole bunch of different parts of training.
So in Israel is really a knight, yeah.
Wow. Right, because we're in service.
We're in service.
That's very, very interesting. Fascinating. Okay. Let's say a few words about the parsha. Thank you, Rabbi Craig. That was beautiful.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let me end this screen share here so that we can start. Okay. And